Hello everyone, I'm Amanda Solk and I've got the great privilege today of talking to Brian Longhurst, who has become a dear friend of mine and is amazing. And he's written an incredible series of books called Seek Ye First the Kingdom. He's written 6 books and he is in the process of writing the 7th. And what are they about? Well, they're all about his amazing lifetime of a relationship, a friendship, an actual friendship with Jesus, and for himself finding out that Jesus is real. So there's so much that I know he wants to tell me, but I had a real strong feeling. Last night, I was praying about this interview and I was asking for guidance because the book is so full of stories that, and Brian, you had given me some ideas, but even so, each one in themselves is so big. So I actually invited Jesus and I invited Olga Park, who Brian will talk about later, and was his teacher and his guide, who has since, passed on. Well, she was very with me last night and she gave me very specific instructions. And she said, let's just concentrate on one part. Let's concentrate on the beginning, the first story about how Brian met Jesus. And she said, and I want you to read it, because I read it out to her last night. And she said, oh, you read it with such feeling. She said, I heard Christ come through your voice and I want you to read it to Brian and let Brian respond from then. So I'll carry on. And now this is a homemade video, folks, so anything could happen. For instance, at some point you might hear a lot of as the dog walks in and drinks loudly from the water bowl. That's sure to happen, because that happens in every interview I ever do. Or then he'll want to suddenly go out and I'll have to pause the video and let him out. Anything could happen. So let's just start from here, because this is absolutely amazing. In my basement lodgings every night, I would kneel at my bedside and open my heart to Jesus and tell him of my love for him, my yearning desire to experience his livingness in my life, close, tender, loving, guiding, whatever, but real to me, as distinct from second-hand accounts of someone else's experience of him. This must have gone on night after night for months. I do not recall now how long, but I do recall very clearly the aching in my heart and soul for this, and how it grew until it was almost beyond endurance. Then, on the 24th of January 1967, after my nightly outpouring, I began to prepare for bed. As I stood in the middle of the room, suddenly he was there in the corner, manifested, superimposed in the place where stood a beechwood chest of drawers with a mirror on it. He was in the midst of an aura of golden, living sunlight, which radiated out from him more than an arm's length in all directions. He was about 3 or 4 paces from me. As I became aware of his presence, he began to move towards me. It was not a walking movement. He seemed to be above the floor a few inches, and he glided. The movement was relatively slow, certainly unhurried, but as he drew nearer, he began to speak. I heard him with my ears. I experienced his speaking with my soul, with my heart. Every cell in my body and every fibre of my being experienced his speaking. There was no part of my being that did not hear him, and every part of my being understood with a total certainty the meaning at a soul knowing level rather than an intellectual knowing level of understanding what was true and the mystical meaning of those words. The words that he spoke were, I discovered later, were from Revelation chapter 3, verse 20. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him and will sup with him, and he with me. To the best of my knowledge, I had not read or heard those words before, so I discovered later. But at that moment, they were a timeless part of my being, and I knew exactly what they meant, because his imparting to me of the words also imbued my mind with the meaning and understanding of them, his meaning of them. By the time he had finished speaking, he had reached less than an arm's length from where I was standing. His aura of golden, living sunlight had enveloped me, and the feeling of love, of agape, to my being was so intense, so powerful, so uplifting to my spirit, that I felt as if my heart had grown to the size of a football and was going to burst out of my chest cavity. This feeling of all-pervasive, all-inclusive love was complete, permeating not just my body, but my entire aura in an orgasm of the soul, immeasurably more intense than any such physical experience. I was blinded by a waterfall of joyous, rapturous tears, and every part of me was alive, electrified as never before. His presence was visible in the midst of the light of his aura, which was at least as bright as the sun, but did not hurt my eyes at all. With me now fully enveloped by his aura, he stopped. His eyes were radiating the all-knowing wisdom of the ages and love, personal love, as well as universal, unconditional love. I knew he loved me personally, in a way, and with a love that is utterly beyond any love I had ever known, heard about, or experienced in the world. He embraced me, not with his physical arms, but with every part of his being, with his total, unconditional, intimate, penetrating, all-encompassing, all-pervasive love. I was a quivering jelly, not from fear. How could fear exist in such an exquisitely beautiful, magnificent encounter? But from being overwhelmed by the power of his love. The moment of this embrace seemed to be timeless, but was probably a few seconds of earth time. I remember reading at some later date in the book of Revelation, chapter 1, verse 16, and his countenance was as the sun shineth in his strength, and saying to myself, that is an exact and perfect description of his appearance. I don't know what to say. It's absolutely amazing. It's what we all wish for, I'm sure. It's certainly what I would wish for, Brian. So I would really love you to spend the rest of this time explaining how, anything you want to add to that, but also explaining how this then has carried on into a really personal relationship to you.
Well, the first thing, and first of all, Amanda, bless you for inviting me. It's my joy to share about Jesus, and I'll do that all day with anyone who's ready to listen.
Great.
But the first comment that I should have included in that description was, he was this close to me, eyeball to eyeball, and as I looked into his eyes, I was looking into eternity. There was no ego in those eyes at all. Now, I've seen dozens of representations of Jesus from illustrators or from actors portraying him in a film or whatever. There is ego in every one of them. And that's because we all still are imbued with the ego. And that shows in our eyes. But in Jesus, there was no ego at all. He was totally at one with eternity. He was a representation of eternity. And when you're looking this close, less than a foot away, into those eyes, which are filled with love, but of which there is no ego, no persona, self, as we experience ourselves walking this earth today. That stuck with me, and I've never seen that in anyone else. It doesn't mean that we're all, you know, short of the mark. We're on our journey, but he has completed his journey, and he is now here. He's come back to lead us, to join with us and share our journey. And he said to me in 1977, "This is your journey and you must take the steps. I can be a staff," that's like a big walking stick, "to assist you in the steep places, but this is your journey. You must take the steps. And this is the only way the journey upon which you have embarked can be completed." Well, of course, it is our journey. Each one of us is on our journey. Most of us think that we're alone, that there's no one to help us. And this is a fearful world. But that isn't actually the case. Jesus is with us every moment. There is never a moment he's not with us. And by way of another little reminder, in 1968, this was an amazing experience in itself. Is it okay to share another experience?
As many as you like.
Okay, because this gives an indication of the real Jesus, how ordinary he is. He's not high and mighty and lifted up. He's an ordinary being. He's the same as all the rest of us. He's love, he's gentle, he's tender, he's caring, he's fun. The world has no consciousness of the fun that Jesus is. So on this occasion, in the spring of 1968, I had just moved into my own apartment in Vancouver. And on Olga's advice, I had established at the one end of a long, low chest of drawers, a place where I could kneel for my prayers. So it was like a prayer table with a candle and so on. So I was in the middle of saying the Lord's Prayer, addressing my words to our Heavenly Father, and suddenly from above, where the ceiling and the wall met, Jesus comes floating down, and he's in a sitting position. And he sits right beside me, less than a hand's breadth away from where I'm kneeling, you know, with my hands in prayer mode. And he's sitting there. Well, that was quite a dilemma for me, because am I supposed to continue directing my thoughts towards our Heavenly Father, or should I be welcoming my newly arrived visitor? Well, he knew exactly what was going through my mind, and he said in such a relaxed, easygoing way, "That's fine, just carry on. I've got plenty of time. I'll wait until you're finished." Well, so I ploughed on and finished. And then when I'd finished, I turned to him as if to say, "Well, thank you for coming. This is amazing. What have I done to warrant such a visit?" Oh, and while I was continuing with the Lord's Prayer, Jesus was sitting there with his legs, his lower legs over the side, over the edge of the chest of drawers, and he was swinging them like this, as anyone would do who's waiting. And he had his hands clasped in his lap, and he was twiddling his thumbs like this. Now, you don't really expect this from the Messiah.
No, you don't.
But this was to put me at ease and let me know that he was just ordinary. He's not someone who's expecting bowing and scraping. That's nothing to do with his real nature at all. So I said to him, how come you're doing this? Why have you come to me when there must be so many people needing your help, much more than I needed? And he said, I am with everyone all the time. There is never a moment when I am not connected with every soul on earth. All that is required for you to connect with me is to start addressing me, start directing your thoughts towards me, and then we're connected. So he's in touch with us all the time, every one of us. There are no exceptions, but most of us are fearful of Jesus. And so we hide ourselves away. Once we say, okay, I want to know Jesus, then we open to him, and that affects the connection. And that connection is there all the time. There is never a moment when that connection is broken, other than by us. Now, of course, we're going around our daily activities and focusing on those, doing the washing up or whatever, being at work, in the office. But that doesn't mean we've only placed him outside ourselves at our choice. His choice is to remain with us. And we can, once we get accustomed to that idea, we can increase the focus of that connection so that we can say to him at any moment in the office, in the middle of a meeting, whatever is going on, anything in the house, walking the dog, and I've done lots of dog walking with Jesus. He's a great dog walker, as I believe you, Amanda, know also.
Yeah.
Only too well.
I've got a question in a minute. Carry on, because it's precisely about what you're talking about. Just you finish what you want to say, because this is so fascinating.
So he's with us all the time. And the way he appeared from where the wall and the ceiling met and just floated down until all in that movement in a sitting position, so that when he landed on the chest of drawers, his legs were already dangling over the edge. And so he was doing this with them. And that's who he is. There are so many intimate, personal experiences of that sort. And it was all to win my trust, to know that he isn't high and mighty up on some pedestal and we're lowly and unworthy. That is all old order mythology. It's gone. It's time now for us to remember who we really are. We're the same as Jesus. We're just pretending not to be. We think, well, we're a mortal body and all the other things. I've been a sinner. I've done all sorts of wrong things. I've made lots of mistakes. Jesus isn't in the least bit interested in any of that. His only question is, okay, so where are we going now? Are you ready to follow me? Are you ready to join with me? But it has to come from us. When the student is ready, the teacher comes. Well, he knew that I was ready, and that's why he came. I asked him to make himself known to me, and he always responds to our sincere, spiritually humble asking. Always. There are no exceptions whatsoever. And that's one of the things that I would like to help people understand. He is with us all. He is real. He's now. He's with us. This is not just some historical character from the Bible. This is the real, live Jesus now, who is ready to join with us on our journey and share with us as we share with him our joys, our sorrows. He's there for it all. He understands us. He's been there. He's now awake from his journey. His journey is completed. So now he's empowered to help us to complete our journey. And in this time, the time of Christ, which is right now, 2020, and has been for some recent years, a few decades, this is the time of Christ. And we are with him, all the Christ. All we have to do is say, okay, I'm ready for this. I'm willing. I yearn to know who I really am. And he will help us to do that.
That is wonderful to know. I mean, it's just so, well, it's beyond comforting. It's hard to use words sometimes because it's just, it's amazing. I mean, because we're always told that, you know, like Jesus is some dead person that can't possibly help us. And the way that, you know, we've been brought up through religion is that to put him on a pedestal. But the thing is, if you put someone on a pedestal, you make them separate from you, and in Christ consciousness there's nobody separate. But I'm just wondering, for anybody who would really love to, if you like, try the communication, I'm just going to ask you something here that I think I might have told you actually, but anyway, when my husband died some years ago, I get the feeling about 3 o'clock in the morning to go and sit at, well, it was a word processor at that time, not a computer. It was back in 1990. Anyway, basically, I was so tired, and he would dictate to me. And I finally, after 3 days of this, I said, why do you always have to choose 3 o'clock in the morning? And he said to me, because you're absolutely exhausted. So your conscious mind can't get in, it's not doing anything. I can speak directly to your subconscious. And then, when you read this piece of paper in the morning, you'll know that it's come directly from me. And that started, so that's one way. So I obeyed. And for the next year and a half, I'd sit at the word processor and I'd be dictated to about not just personal things about my life and what was going to happen, which all turned out to be true, by the way. But also, so I got used to this kind of communication. And then I thought, well, I wonder if it always has to happen like 3 o'clock in the morning, and when I'm sat at the word processor, I wonder if it could just happen anytime. So, you know, whatever I was doing, cooking, in the bath, whatever, I just talked to him. I started, because I thought, well, there's a line of communication open, so I just would talk. Now, at first, this is the thing I want to ask you. At first, it felt like I was making up thoughts. I was just saying, how are you? Or can you tell me about this or whatever? And it sounded like I was making up thoughts. But I started to realize that after a little while, it was like I was opening a door, and then I got thoughts back. Now, they were in my voice. It wasn't like, for me, it wasn't that it was his voice speaking outside of me. It was still like my voice, but the thoughts weren't me thinking them, because I was now being told things that I didn't know. I'd ask a question and now I'd get an answer. And he started to tell me all about what life was like after death, and all sorts of things. And it was just amazing. Went on for about 18 months. But that's what I want to ask you is, and then I did it with my grandma. I was making some lemon meringue pie and it went wrong. I asked her in my thoughts. I didn't even think I was asking her. And then she said, no, you're using the wrong pie filling. Now, I know that sounds really trivial, but I thought, oh my God, now that was a thought. It sounded like my voice, but it came to me and I didn't think it. So I started to get used to it. And then now, all the time, people die and I talk to them and they talk to me. So that's what I want to ask you about. So I'll mute now and listen to what you can tell me about that, because that's what people would love to know. How can they do it, you say?
Okay, well, in my own personal experience from Jesus back in the 60s and beyond and with others from spirit, the realms of light, or wherever in the afterlife, as people call it here. Sometimes I hear the voice objectively, and it is the voice of the other person, but I think that is perhaps when they're trying to get my attention. But once we're in that state of communion, connected mind to mind, then the thoughts, for want of a better term, that come in from the other person are something very close to my own thoughts. And so one might readily say, and a skeptic would say, well, they are your own thoughts. But very often the thoughts are completely new, as you yourself will have experienced with your husband. So it's very much a case of gradually learning how to discern the difference between your own thoughts and those of the communicating party. But it's most readily discernible because the thoughts that come in are objective. They're not subjective. And it's obvious that this is the communication from another mind. Ultimately, there is only one mind. Jesus had to appear in form 2,000 years ago, because if he hadn't, nobody would have been aware of his presence. And so if we move that line of thinking to the voice, the spoken word, sometimes it has to be an external voice. Like if there's an emergency, you'll hear someone issuing an emergency instruction. Like when Sebastian was 6 and they were in that train crash and he was thrown under the train, and Jesus...
Sebastian Blacksley.
Yes. So
he was thrown under the train, that's right, and heard the
and
voice.
Jesus must have been terrifying beyond imagining, a 6-year-old boy. And Jesus spoke to him, and that must have been a very objective voice, saying, "Don't move, stay where you are, you're safe, I'm looking after you." Well, that had to be very much an objective voice. There are no limitations from spirit. They can communicate with us at the level we're ready to experience their communicating. And if we're in the nascent stages of developing this two-way communication, they will need to communicate in a way that we cannot mistake it as being an external voice. But as we become more accustomed to it, they don't need to use, let's use the term, they don't need to use as much energy to reach us. And so, you know, they're in relaxed mode as they want us to be in relaxed mode. So it's just the exchanges going back and to, but they're in resonance. And all Jesus has said many things to me over 5 decades, more than 5 decades, that I didn't understand at the time. Some I couldn't believe could be true. But I always have found that whatever he said was true. Sometimes it took me even years to understand that what he'd said going back a long time was true. Even though at the time I didn't understand it as being so. Okay, Mandy?
Well, it's just that, no, I mean, this is really, really great stuff. I just wanted to mention quickly that when you referred to Sebastian, you were referring to Sebastian Blacksley, who's written also a series of 7 books called that are called the Choose Only Love series, and they're amazing. And they're also, you know, that's just another person where there's more proof here of somebody who's had direct experience of Jesus. Now, just going, and they're amazing, and he is amazing, and just beautiful person and a good friend of us both. And I just wanted to say that I mean, this is utterly my experience, that everything that my husband told me, every single thing, I mean, just came true. Things I couldn't possibly know about, and all the time it just sounded like that. And just very quickly, when I had a motorbike accident that was incredible. That because in this motorbike accident, the bike met a car, and then the car and the bike was a complete write-off. It was a massive accident, and I died. But while I died, I went up, and anyway. But the thing is, so the outcome of the accident is obviously I'm still here, and but I had not even a scratch on me. I didn't have any whiplash even. I didn't have any shock after the accident. Like when you trip, if you trip over, that's more of a shock. I had no shock after this accident and no bruises. I had nothing but a feeling of bliss. Now, all I'm going to say is that in that case, I heard, but it was in my head, let go of the handlebars, because a second before, less than a second, I thought, right, this bike is now meeting this car and it's going to be an almighty crash and I'm going to die. When I saw I was going to die, I immediately relaxed and was told, but it was like a thought. I wouldn't say it's external. It was just a thought, a definite let go of the handlebars. Now, that wasn't my thought, because it's counterintuitive. You want to hold on for dear life, literally. But I didn't. I let go. I obeyed that thought, and that saved my life, because I was taken out of my body and thoroughly protected while the crash was going on. So this is why I've cut in, you see, because like you're saying, for Sebastian, I mean, he's not right here, you know, with us in this room at the moment. So it's hard for me to remember actually whether it was external or it was in a thought, or it was a bit of both. But I know it said, I am here. And everything that's ever been told to him by Jesus, like you, has been exactly true. It's been completely true and beyond words. So I'd just like you to say more about that communication, and then go on to tell any stories, and then also tell us about Olga Park. Oh, it's so exciting.
Golly.
Sorry, that was a lot.
Well, whether it seems to be an external voice or an internal voice, your own thought, as it were, but an objective one, doesn't really make any difference. It's the message that's important rather than the mechanism of its delivery. And that requires trust. And people who are fearful of the metaphysical, of the mystical, of Jesus, because they think he's coming again to judge the quick and the dead, which is a complete lie. He never says that in the Bible, and he's never said it since. In all his recordings with Helen Schuckman and Marie Perron and untold others, he's not coming again to judge the quick and the dead. And he says that in the Bible. He is quoted in the scriptures that Orthodox Christians revere. If any man hear my voice and not believe, I judge them not. I have not come to judge the world, I have come to save the world. Now that is an almost verbatim quote from Jesus in the gospel records. Well, if we're willing to take him at face value on that, we've nothing to be afraid of. He hasn't come to judge you or me or any of us. He's come to be our friend. How can he save us if we're fearful of him? He wants to win our friendship. And how does anyone win friendship? By being friendly, by being easy, by being amicable, by being fun. And some of the fun things that have happened over the years, I'm totally relaxed. I was a bit fearful, a bit edgy the first time he spoke through Olga Park, which was a few months before the encounter that you read earlier, Amanda. But because I didn't really know him then. I wanted to know him, but when he asked me the question, speaking through Olga, he said to me, "What is your desire?" Well, I was a bit nervous about that because I'd never really thought about my desire. And if this is the Christ speaking, I better have the answer correct, otherwise there might be trouble. Such was my naivety. I was 22 at that stage. And so I was a novice, a complete novice at the whole idea of contact with Jesus. I want to reassure everybody, if they're taking their first step, there is nothing to fear. He's our friend. He's delightful. Oh, and here's a little anecdote to share. A couple of months, 2 or 3 months ago, one Sunday morning, the first thing I do when I come down in the morning is empty the dishwasher. So I'm unloading the dishwasher and Jesus is sitting there on the counter and we're communing together. He's in relaxed mode and he knows I've got to do the job, so I'm getting on with it. But while I'm unloading the dishwasher, I'm telling him how I feel about him, how totally I love him, how he is the world to me, how he is my joy, my completion. And this went on for, I don't know, maybe a minute, telling him how dear he is to me. And he sits there waiting. He wasn't swinging his legs or twiddling his thumbs, but he was relaxed. And when I'd finished, he looked me straight in the eye and he said, "Everything you have just said about me is exactly the way I feel about you." And that is true for every living soul. That is exactly how he feels about all of us. How can that be when we're so imperfect in our bodily presentation to the world? We haven't a clue about what we're doing most of the time. Well, he's not seeing that. He's seeing our higher self, our real self, the eternal self. We're just having this rather ridiculous dream about being separate. You can't be separate from the source of life and still be alive. So we are alive, manifestly. So there is a connection between our inner self, our higher self, and Jesus and every other self, because there's only one of us.
And I mean, it's just so wonderful to hear this. It's just so reassuring, it's comforting, but it's far more than that. It's just, you know, opening that connection. And because of this, I want to ask you about Olga. So if you just explain in a moment who Olga is, and how you met her, and how knowing her helped you to really have that trust. Because I agree with you, we can't not agree, it's truth, isn't it? It's the trust, it's 100% the trust. Because just before I hand it back to you, this is what I learned, is that, you know, can my husband or can my grandma, could they really be speaking to me when it just, am I just making this up, you know? And then actually I just decided, well, why not trust it? I mean, just why not just go with it? What have you got to lose? So I thought, okay, so I'll just trust it. And then it was great. The first day I trusted, I'll just tell you this really briefly. So my husband had died, and we're having some people round to do some memorial at my house, and I'm going to the florist to get some flowers. Suddenly he's in the car with me. So what I mean, I want to get this clear because it's really important, this, because it's highlighting what you're saying, so everybody watching it can try it. So I'm in the car and I just got the feeling and the very strong thought that he was next to me in the car. So when I sort of looked out of my peripheral vision, I can't say he was either external or internal. And like you said before, it didn't matter because I just knew I'd learnt to trust that he was there. And I'm just going to the florist, and he says to me, "Don't go to the florist because they haven't got any flowers." And I said, "Don't be ridiculous. It's on a Saturday. Of course they've got flowers." He says, "No, they haven't got any flowers. You'll have to go to," and he said, "the next village." So I didn't believe him because I didn't trust. So I go to this florist that I go to every week, and they said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I haven't got any flowers. We had a flood last night and it leaked everywhere. You'll have to go," and said the other name of the village. And so I got back in the car, and there was no question. He went, he was just laughing and laughing. And he said, "I told you so." And I just looked as if he really was there, looked at him. And I went, so then I went to the other florist, got my flowers, and then I thought, well, I just trust this then. And I started to trust, and then he told me all sorts of things that were just, first of all, there were worldly things like where I'd live and when to ring somebody up because it's the only time they could come, otherwise they were going to Australia. You know, things like that. But I mean, it was just so I just learned to trust. So I'm just sort of want to hear about Olga, and if in knowing Olga it helped you to really strengthen that trust as well. So over to you.
Oh, without Olga, I don't know where I would be. She was the exact completion of my requirement at that time, and she was 6,000 miles away in on the west coast of Canada, and I was in England, and I thought, I need to get away. I need to go. This was 1963, the summer of '63, and I was telling this couple that I knew that I felt I needed to go to Canada. I was 18 at the time, no, just turned 19. And so I was telling them that I thought I would go to Canada to go and, as it were, find myself, but that I would do this when I was about 23. And they looked at each other, and then they looked at me, and in one voice they said, "Why wait?" And I didn't have any answer to that. So I thought, okay, I might as well do it now. So I went through all the procedures of immigration and so on. And one few weeks before I was going, or a few months before I was going, my mother and I were having a cup of tea one Sunday at the kitchen table. And so she used to do reading the tea leaves, and I'd never done it, never been able to get it to work. So I decided I would try it this time. So I drank the tea slowly as to let the leaves come up the side of the cup. And when I looked inside the cup, there was a perfect map of Canada in the tea leaves. Perfect, every detail. Now, that I knew that was an omen, so off I went. Got out to Canada, started going to church, because I thought, if I'm looking for God, where else can I find him? I got enrolled into teaching Sunday school and all this stuff. There was a Sunday school teacher's manual, and which each teacher had, and this disappeared from my presence. It just completely evaporated. So the people at the church said, you'll need to go into the Bible bookshop in downtown Vancouver, where they've got copies and you can get another one there. So I went to the Bible bookshop and bought a copy of the Sunday school teacher's manual. And I chatted with the very charming lady who was running the bookshop. And I suddenly realized it was time to get back to work. This was lunchtime. So as I headed for the door, my hand, I'm just reaching for a book. My hand reached round the corner of this bookshelf and pulled a book off the shelf. And this is the book, Between Time and Eternity. And its author was Olga Park. And this is her. This was written in about the early 1960s. And so I thought, well, if this is being placed in my hand, I better have a look at it. Between Time and Eternity. Well, anything to do with eternity, I wanted to know about it, big time, because eternity was really high on my radar, wanting to know about it. So I said to the lady, oh, this looks interesting, but I didn't have enough money to buy it at the time. And she said, well, take it, read it. If you like it, you can come back and pay for it. If not, just bring it back, and then nobody's lost anything. So as a parting, so I took the book, and as a parting comment, she said, oh, the author of that book lives in Vancouver. So I read the book not long after, and remembering what she said, went back to the bookshop and said, I've got to speak to Olga Park. So she gave me the details, how to find Olga, because she wasn't in the phone book, but she knew Olga's son, who worked with her, or her husband knew Olga's son, because they worked at the post office together. So I phoned Olga and said, I've just read your book and I have to come and see you. So along I went, and as I walked up the steps to her front door, the peace of heaven descended upon me, enveloped me in the stillness, in the absolute stillness. And I knew that I had arrived where I was supposed to be. This was the next stage of my journey. Well, Olga welcomed me, and this was a Sunday afternoon, and I spent many hours asking questions, and she answered everything spontaneously. She talked about Jesus in a way that I had never heard anyone speak about Jesus. And this awakened in me a love for Jesus and a yearning to know him, as she obviously knew him. She'd had manifestations of him. He spoke to her all the time. He was just ordinary to her. She referred to him as the master in a very loving and accepting way. And so that's what brought me to that place. And so I used to visit her cottage, which was 20 miles outside Vancouver, several times a week for hours. It was the things that she shared about Jesus and about heaven was mother's milk to my soul. So that continued our relationship with her as my mentor and me as her student until then I met Teresa and we married and we came back to England in 1970. So for 5 or 6 years, Olga had been my spiritual mentor. She was from Yorkshire originally. So we had here these 2 English people with a love for Jesus, a love for singing hymns, which she played to accompany us on an auto harp. She used to rewrite the hymns because she said the words were wrong. This was so characteristic of her, and she was completely correct. The words were the understanding of Jesus as presented by the old order perception of him from the church. But she had no hesitation in rewriting the words, and those were times of the greatest joy. And after having a cup of afternoon tea with English biscuits, it was great fun. And so then, if you'd like to interject any points or questions at that point, then we can move on from there.
Okay. It's really interesting hearing about Olga, because I mean, how incredible that you met her in that incredible way. It's fantastic. When I think of the most sacred relationships in my life, they've come to me in such a way. They really have. But so was it through knowing Olga? At what point did you start to write the book Seek Ye First the Kingdom? Just can you tell us a little bit about that, about the book and everything?
With pleasure, yes. Well, Teresa and I came back to England and raised a family. We came back here in 1970, and towards the late, and I was just working in my career, and you know, we were making our life here, raising the family, running the business, and all the while these experiences with Jesus were continuing, and others from the realms of light. I came to know a number of people, which we can talk about whenever you like, the rector and the teacher and various others. But by the late 90s, I began to realize that having been blessed with so many extraordinary experiences, mystical, metaphysical experiences, if I came to the place where I was breathing my last, excuse me, and hadn't made any effort to record these events for sharing with anybody else who might be interested, then I would be left with one overpowering state of mind, and that would be regret that I had had all these experiences but hadn't made any effort to share them. So I decided to start writing a manuscript, excuse me, and that took me 3 or 4 years. There wasn't any particular rush, and I was just recording, typing onto my computer the experiences as they came back to my recollection, mostly in chronological order, but some of them were not. And part 2 of the book, which is called Vignettes, is a series of short recorded events which didn't need to fit in any particular chronological sequence. So by about the turn of the millennium, I'd written about 80,000 words, which all just came from my recollections, but I'd also I've got hundreds of thousands of words of messages from Jesus. I'll just show you, if I may, one book. This is a ring binder, as you can see, and this is the messages from 1987, all handwritten.
Wow.
All handwritten.
Tons.
There are tens of thousands of words here, maybe more. I've no idea, I've never counted them. But I transcribed all these onto my computer. And I'm a slow typist, so I'm sure I got help. But this is his speaking with me and my speaking with him, recorded.
Wow, that's amazing.
So without and I put the date and the year on every message, every communicating exchange, I put the date. And without having recorded all of those, I wouldn't have been able to write this book or the books subsequent to it. So I used that as my kind of base material to work from. And at first, I thought, well, who's going to publish this? So I went to night school, learned how to create a website, and I published this manuscript. It ended up being 120,000 words on my website. And then a friend of mine in Canada was over here visiting, and I mentioned something about what had been in the book, and he didn't know. So I said, oh, I thought you'd read the book. He said, well, reading off a website isn't that easy. You may want to take the book to bed with you or on a trip or whatever. And so I've read snippets, but I haven't got the whole story. He said, so I gave him a computer printout, which he read on the plane back to Canada. And then when he got there, he said, Brian, this is fantastic. You really need a publisher. And that was in 2010. And then synchronicity took over. And a friend of ours, there was this gal called Julie in Texas. And I'd been out for a walk in the hills, communing with Jesus. And when I came back to my desk, there was a blog from Julie on my computer monitor. And I thought, well, how did that get there? I've never heard of this person. So I thought, okay, Holy Spirit, you must have put it there, so you must want me to read it. So I read it, and I knew I had to contact her. So I wrote to her and said, I've just seen your blog, and I feel as if I've known you forever just reading that. So I shared some bits from the manuscript, including the bit about my first encounter with Jesus in 1967. And she wrote back and said, funny you should say that, because reading what you've written, I feel I've known you forever also. Well, to cut a long story short, she was instrumental in getting me into contact with a publisher. And so that's how the book came to be published. I sent the publisher the manuscript, and she came back and said, I'm very happy to go with this. So I completed the book, got it all ready for the publisher, and it was published in 2012. And I thought, okay, I've done what I really felt moved to do, and that is share some of these experiences. And so I had some very interesting feedback. One from a gal up in the north of England called Sue. And she said, she's actually from America, but she's lived here for many years. And she said to me, when are we going to see another book from you? Because I know there's one there within you. Well, the same 3 people said that to me within 3 weeks. 3 separate people within 3 weeks said that. Well, when one person says it, you think, yeah. But when 3 people say it in a short time, you think, well, if I'm not listening to my inner promptings, how am I going to know what I'm missing? And then within not very long, I found myself writing book 2 without even realizing that there was a second book. And that just flowed out of me, and I shared more of the records from that ring binder that I've just shown you. And that was published on Easter Day, Resurrection Day, 2016. And within 3 days after that, as I came and sat at my desk, the Holy Spirit gave me the title of the next 4 books. I didn't know there were going to be 4 more books. And I had to write them down. He was dictating them so fast I could barely scribble them down.
Oh, wow.
And then 3 months after that, he gave me the title for book 7. So I knew there was going to be a series of 7 books. Now the titles I discovered are a sequence, starting with Seek Ye First the Kingdom. The title of book 2 was Finding the Kingdom Within. Well, if you're seeking the kingdom in the right place, which is within, you're going to find it. So that made sense. And then the title for book 3 is, and I thought, well, when you found the kingdom within, that's the end of the journey. But I was mistaken. The Holy Spirit had other ideas, and he said, the next step on this journey is when you have found the kingdom within, you enter the kingdom within. And I thought, well, that makes absolute sense. Never thought of it. And then the title for book 4 was Living from the Kingdom Within. And I thought, well, wow, I can't argue with any of this. This is absolute sense. So then the title for book 5, when you've been living from the kingdom within for some while, you're ready to share the kingdom within. So book 5 is sharing the kingdom within. And after that, book 6, the title is Extending the Kingdom Within. And when you've been sharing it for a while, you find that more people are being drawn and wanting to hear. So that's extending it even further beyond your immediate circle of connectedness. So the book 7 hasn't been published yet. So I'm a little unsure whether to announce the title, but since it's you, Amanda, and
Go on.
so long as you don't tell anyone,
I won't tell anyone.
the title for book 7 is Being the Kingdom Within.
Oh,
and
wow.
I knew that that was it. So the point about it that blew me away was, this is a series of sequential steps: seek, find, enter, live from, share, extend, be. So we've got 7 steps of our journey from square one, where we're seeking the kingdom, which is what I was doing in '64 when I went to Canada. I didn't know that. I was seeking something, what was inside wanting to come out. I didn't know what it was, but that was the first step, seeking first the kingdom. And so this has been the story of my journey over the last, well, 53 or so years. But actually the journey began long before that, multi-incarnations before that. Now we can perhaps, if there's any more interviews that come to mind, then perhaps we can talk about that on another occasion.
Definitely. I think there'll be loads of interviews. And I think, like this one, it made itself known to us of what it was going to be about. And so we'll definitely do interviews. I think we'll just wait to see what the next one's about. It could be about the next book, but it could be something different, or it could be another part of this book. Who knows? But I'm sure Olga and Jesus will tell us. And it's been absolutely fabulous. I have loved hearing about this. And because, you know, the title of this interview is "He is Real," you know, Jesus, and that you've made that so plain and so clear, and everybody could just can really knock on that door, and I'm sure that many people will try it. The thing that I would say, I'm sure you would say, is, but trust and don't give up. Don't give up at the first, oh, I've not heard anything. Just keep going with it, because it's just amazing. So I just really, really want to thank you. Anything else you want to say, Brian?
That word trust that you've just spoken, that is crucial. Without trust, most people don't even trust themselves because they don't know themselves. But arriving at a place of willingness to trust Jesus, without that trust, we'll never be able to hear him, because we're keeping the door of our inner awareness closed against him. The way he appeared to me on that first occasion in 1967, he won my trust totally, forever. I became utterly espoused to him. and his great God mission for all mankind, which is bringing the kingdom of heaven consciousness into the earth life, so that we can live according to the love and peace and joy of the kingdom in time and place, as distinct from conflict, war, famine, greed, selfishness, all the things that afflict the human state of being so much of the time. And we're in the time when that is in the process of changing. We are now on the cusp of the great awakening to the reality of who we all really are, which is love, peace, joy, oneness. But without trust, none of that can happen. We've got to be willing to trust Jesus. And that all we need to do is give him an opportunity to win our trust. And by opening the door and saying, okay, Jesus, I really want this. I really want this. And then he will bring us one step at a time to that place where we recognize that he really is trustworthy. And so we can open ourselves totally. We need to have no reservations about Jesus. We don't. It's impossible to hide anything from God or Jesus. The idea is absurd. They know everything about us, far more than we know about ourselves. Trust, trust, trust.
Well, thank you so much, because that's why I'm doing these interviews. I'm specifically interested in people like you and Sebastian Blacksley who have real life experiences. And I know there's many people of Jesus, and this point of trusting, and trusting is, as you say, crucial. And I'm dedicated to helping people to come forth and talk about this, so that everyone can see it and try it for themselves, because this is the thing that's going to change everything that's happening in the world. So it's videos like this are absolutely crucial. So thank you so much, and I can't wait till we do the next one. We don't know when it'll be, what it'll be about, but it's going to be blooming exciting. So love you so much, Brian. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye, love. Thank you so much. I love you too. Until next time.
Till next time, definitely. Right, stop recording.